The void of space was unnervingly silent, the kind of silence only the infinite blackness of the galaxy could bring. Yet, this quiet, ancient emptiness was about to be shattered in ways unimaginable. The Vrax Dominion, a ruthless empire known for its brutality and vast reach, had set its sights on Earth. Humanity was still in its early stages of interstellar exploration. Its greatest achievements lay in the infancy of spacefaring technology. To the Vrax, Earth was just another world, an insignificant speck on the galactic map. They had dealt with far more advanced species, annihilating them with clinical precision. The Dominion's leaders didn't even bother with the formality of diplomacy. They simply decided Earth was a conquest waiting to happen. The invasion came without warning. A fleet of Vrax warships, tens of thousands strong, jumped into the Sol system in the blink of an eye. Their ships were a terrifying sight. Monolithic, behemoths of dark metal, their hulls pocked with the scars of countless battles. Massive weapons platforms glowed ominously as they powered up, ready to unleash devastating firepower. The Vrax had conquered countless star systems, bent civilizations to their will, and crushed resistance with a speed and efficiency that seemed unstoppable. Earth, with its primitive defenses, would be no different. The Dominion would wipe out humanity, annex the planet, and move on to the next conquest. The galaxy had seen it all before. The first salvo was fired at Earth's outer defense grid. Humanity's fledgling space fleet was not equipped to handle such an assault. It was a ragtag collection of aging vessels, retrofitted military ships, and hastily assembled civilian crafts. But to the Vrax, they were a joke, an easy target to pulverize and sweep aside. But what the Dominion didn't account for was human ingenuity. The Battle of Proxima Centauri would be the first sign of their fatal miscalculation. As Vrax warlords watched from their flagship command centers, expecting to see a swift and decisive victory, something strange began to happen. The human ships didn't break. They didn't panic. They fought back. The Eclipse, a heavily modified human cruiser, darted between the Vrax warships like a predator in the night, its engines flashing bright against the darkness of space. The Vrax unleashed barrage after barrage of plasma fire, only to watch in horror as the Eclipse zigzagged through the attacks with breathtaking agility. The ship was unlike anything the Dominion had encountered before. With cutting-edge stealth, technology, and near-perfect maneuverability, the Eclipse became a shadow, an enigma that defied all conventional tactics. But it wasn't just the Eclipse that turned the tide. Across the battlefield, the rest of humanity's fleet displayed an unexpected mastery of space combat. The Vrax, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with superior firepower, had failed to account for one thing: humanity's ability to adapt. While the Vrax fired their plasma bolts, the human ships were already on the move, changing course, weaving between their shots, firing back with railguns that seemed to be aimed with impossible precision. Each impact struck vital points on the Vrax ships. Shields flickered and collapsed. Engine cores went dark, and entire sections of the massive warships were torn apart. But the true revelation came with the use of artificial intelligence. The Vrax had relied on their own battle algorithms to coordinate attacks, but these algorithms were rigid, predictable. The humans, on the other hand, had developed an AI system that could think, adapt, and outthink its enemies. Human ships were not merely following pre-programmed routines, they were learning, evolving in real time. Their weapon systems switched tactics mid-battle, adjusting to the weaknesses they discovered in Vrax ships, exploiting gaps in their defenses. Every time the Dominion attempted a counterattack, the human fleet seemed to anticipate their moves before they made them. One of the most stunning examples of human ingenuity came when a small fleet of human stealth ships infiltrated the Vrax command ship, the Vrakthar, while it was deep in combat. These ships didn't just hide in the dark, they became one with it, using a new form of cloaking technology the Vrax couldn't even detect. Once inside the Vrakthar, the stealth ships unleashed an EMP pulse that knocked out the command center's electronic systems, causing confusion and chaos throughout the Vrax fleet. In that split second of disarray, the human fleet struck harder than ever, capitalizing on the panic and confusion. The Vraks didn't know how to respond. They had never fought an enemy who fought so unpredictably, so ruthlessly. They had never fought an enemy that adapted so quickly, with a will to survive, that burned like fire. At the heart of it all was the human resolve. The Vraks had fought countless wars, crushed rebellions and exterminated species without a second thought. But humanity wasn't like any other species the Dominion had encountered. Humanity fought not just for survival, but for something more. It wasn't just a battle for a world, it was a battle for identity, for a species that had risen from the ashes of its own mistakes and was determined to make its mark on the stars. This wasn't a war fought for territory or resources, it was a war fought for freedom, freedom from the suffocating grasp of a conqueror who believed no species was worth more than its resources. As the battle raged on, Warlord Zirak, the Vrak Supreme Commander, began to understand the horrifying reality of his situation. His fleet was being torn apart by the very species he had deemed insignificant. It wasn't just the tactics, the weapons, or the technology. It was something deeper, something that the Vraks had never considered. Humanity was fighting with a ferocity that came from something no machine could replicate, something that no amount of superior technology could overcome. The human spirit. And then, as the battle reached its peak, a transmission from Earth pierced the Dominion's encrypted communications. The message was simple, direct and delivered with chilling clarity in perfect Vraxian. You wanted war. Now you have it. The words hung in the cold, empty space like a final, irrevocable judgment. Humanity had not been preparing for a conflict with the Vraks for years. They had been preparing for centuries. Every conflict, every military strategy, every technological leap had been made with one purpose in mind: to face the unknown, to fight against the stars themselves. The Vraks were the enemy, yes, but more than that. They represented a threat humanity had seen before, a threat it had risen to face time and time again. And now they had awakened a species that was not only capable of defending itself, but one capable of pushing back, and it was too late for the Vraks to turn back. They had made their decision. Now they would face the consequences. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, Galactic War Stories is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you love epic sci-fi battles, deep space mysteries, and the untold stories of the cosmos, hit subscribe. It's free and it helps us grow this universe together. The Vraks fleet, once a massive and unstoppable force, was now beginning to fracture under the weight of humanity's resistance. Warlord Zirak stood on the command deck of the Vraktar, his eyes fixed on the battle unfolding before him. The screens flickered with static as his command ship took several direct hits from human railgun fire. He could feel the tension in the air, thick with the realization that his once impenetrable fleet was unraveling. The initial shock of the human retaliation had shifted from disbelief to a chilling understanding. This wasn't a typical battle. It wasn't even about tactics anymore. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. And with every passing moment, Zirak felt the power slip from his grasp. The Vraktar, the flagship of the Dominion's war machine, had always been a symbol of invincibility. Its shields were designed to withstand the most intense bombardments, its weapons capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single strike. But against the human fleet, it was proving to be a relic. The Vraktar had sustained multiple breaches, its once gleaming hull now a scarred testament to the ferocity of human ingenuity. Zirak had watched helplessly as one of his destroyers, Azrak, was crippled by a sudden unanticipated strike, a human torpedo designed to penetrate the heavily reinforced Vrak's armor. It was a weapon the Dominion had no countermeasure for, a missile that adapted to the slightest change in trajectory, homing in on weak points in the enemy's defense. As the Azrak lost power and drifted into the void, its crewless hull, a ghostly silhouette against the stars, Zirak's mind raced. What had gone wrong? How could this have happened? The Vraks had been victorious in countless battles against species far more powerful than humanity. Yet now they found themselves on the edge of defeat, facing an enemy they had underestimated, an enemy whose resolve was unbreakable. What the Dominion had failed to account for was the human drive, the ability to innovate, to defy the odds, and to adapt in ways no other species in the galaxy had ever demonstrated. On Earth, the mood was anything but victorious. Despite the initial success, humanity knew the battle was far from over. The Vraks were not a race to retreat easily. If anything, the first blow had only made them more determined. Every battle, every skirmish only heightened the stakes. Earth's leaders, generals, and scientists were already preparing for the worst, an all-out, relentless counterattack. But humanity had one advantage the Vraks did not. It knew how to fight together. The Global Defense Alliance, once fragmented by petty borders and rivalries, had united under the banner of survival. Nations put aside their differences, pooling their resources and knowledge to defend their homeworld. At the heart of this global effort was a team of scientists who had been working on a secret project for years, an endeavor far beyond the technological prowess of Earth's known capabilities. It was a weapon, yes, but one that had the potential to change the course of the war entirely. In the underground laboratories of the North American Coalition, a team of the world's brightest minds worked tirelessly, refining an advanced AI that could control a new form of warfare, biomechanical war machines humanoid in shape, capable of independent thought and action, designed to infiltrate and sabotage the most fortified positions. The project had begun in secret, far from prying eyes, and had reached its final stage just as the Vraks launched their invasion. Now, the first generation of biomech warriors was ready. They were housed in enormous underground chambers, their sleek metallic bodies lying dormant awaiting activation. These machines were not just weapons, they were sentient, capable of learning, evolving, and making tactical decisions on their own. Each was armed with advanced plasma weaponry, adaptive shields, and retractable wings for aerial combat. They could infiltrate the enemy's ranks, disrupt their communications, and launch strikes from within, leaving the Vraks wondering if they were fighting an army of humans or something far more terrifying. Meanwhile, on the front lines of space, the human fleet was undergoing a metamorphosis of its own. They had been forced to evolve in real time, reacting to the Vraks' every move with countermeasures and unexpected strikes. But this evolution was not just in tactics, it was in the very core of their technology. The human engineers, working in secret shipyards orbiting Jupiter, had developed a revolutionary form of stealth tech that would render their ships nearly invisible to the Vraks' sensors. Their newest prototype, the Spectre, was a ship that could phase in and out of the electromagnetic spectrum, making it nearly undetectable to any known form of detection. It was a gamble, a high-risk, high-reward tactic that would only work if the humans could outmaneuver their enemies long enough to deploy it effectively. The Spectre was designed for infiltration. Its mission was to strike at the heart of the Vraks' command structure. If humanity could take down Zirak and the other warlords, it would cripple the Dominion's war effort. The plan was audacious, even by human standards, but it was the only chance they had left. As the Spectre and its fleet of support ships made their way toward the Vraks' flagship, the crew prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. Inside the command center, Captain Isabel Lang, a former fighter pilot turned tactical genius, ran over the final calculations. The risk of failure was immense. If they were detected even for a second, the entire fleet would be wiped out. But if they succeeded, they could cripple the Vraks' leadership, throwing their entire war machine into disarray. Back on Earth, the war continued to ravage the surface. Major cities were in ruins, and the human population was stretched to its limits. Refugees poured into the underground bunkers, while humanity's military forces fought a desperate guerrilla campaign against the Vraks' ground forces. The Dominion had landed large contingents on Earth, hoping to subjugate the planet from the inside out. But they had underestimated human resilience. Civilians, once considered helpless in the face of such overwhelming force, had risen to become a formidable resistance. Armed with scavenged weapons, homemade explosives, and a fierce desire to protect their homes, they began sabotaging Vraks' supply lines, launching surprise attacks on the enemy's command posts and freeing human prisoners. The Vraks' advanced technology was powerful, but it couldn't account for the human spirit, the refusal to give up no matter how impossible the odds. The galaxy was about to learn a valuable lesson. Humanity had a fire within it that no alien species could extinguish. The battle was far from over. The Vracs may have started the war, but humanity had become something far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. The stars above Earth were burning with the fury of 1,000 conflicts. The Vracs' dominion had underestimated humanity's capacity for resistance, and now they were paying the price. Despite their overwhelming numbers, their massive warships and their technological superiority, the Vracs were learning the hard way that they had sparked a fire they couldn't easily extinguish. The war was no longer one-sided. The balance had shifted. The very forces they had hoped to crush in a single strike had become the architects of their destruction. On the surface of Earth, the human resistance was gaining momentum. Cities lay in ruins, but from the ashes of destruction, humanity had risen like a tidal wave. The Vracs had deployed their ground forces in an attempt to dominate the planet. Massive insectoid soldiers, each one clad in exoskeletons, impervious to most human weapons, and armed with plasma rifles capable of reducing buildings to molten slag. But what the Vracs hadn't expected was humanity's ability to adapt to every challenge, to fight not just with technology, but with cunning. The resistance, made up of soldiers, scientists, engineers, and civilians alike, had begun using unconventional tactics that the Vracs couldn't predict. They set traps that exploited every weakness the Dominion forces had. They used the urban environment to their advantage, forcing the Vracs into confined spaces where their enormous size and advanced weaponry were liabilities. Human ingenuity shone brightest in these moments. One of the most feared weapons of the resistance was a series of electromagnetic pulse mines. These mines were strategically placed along the Vracs' supply routes, designed to cripple their advanced technology. When detonated, they shut down entire swathes of Vraxian equipment, leaving their forces vulnerable to attack. The Battle of New York was one of the defining moments of the war. The Vracs had underestimated the city's ability to resist. As the insectoid soldiers marched through Central Park, their chitinous legs crushing the earth beneath them, they were blindsided by guerrilla fighters armed with improvised weapons and underground networks. The humans, using their vast knowledge of their own terrain, struck quickly and decisively. They used firebombs, hacked Vracs' communication systems, and even planted explosives in the heart of the Vraxian supply chains. Every blow was a message. Earth would not fall without a fight, but it wasn't just on Earth that the war was being decided. In the cold vacuum of space, humanity's fleet was rewriting the very rules of interstellar warfare. While the Vracs had long relied on sheer firepower to dominate, the humans had brought something different to the table: their ability to think beyond the conventional. The Spectre, humanity's first stealth ship capable of bending the very fabric of light, had become the spearhead of the counteroffensive. It was a silent predator, slipping through the Vracs' sensor nets undetected. With a crew of elite operatives and highly trained pilots, the Spectre was tasked with infiltrating the heart of the Vracs' war effort, the Vrakthar, the flagship of their invasion fleet. Captain Isabel Lang, the commander of the Spectre, had seen the carnage the Vracs had inflicted on Earth. Her resolve was as unyielding as the metal beneath her feet. As the ship glided silently through the shadows of the battle, Lang couldn't shake the sense that this mission was more than just a tactical strike. It was a reckoning. If the Spectre could disable the Vrakthar, it would send shockwaves through the entire Dominion fleet. The loss of their command ship would shatter their unity, creating a ripple effect that would weaken their hold on every sector they had conquered. The humans would not just win, they would make it impossible for the Vracs to ever threaten Earth again. But infiltrating the Vrakthar was no easy task. The warlord Zirak had fortified his ship with layers of protection that would make even the most seasoned infiltrators hesitate. Its defenses were beyond anything humanity had encountered. Vraxian warships were equipped with advanced cloaking devices, near impenetrable shields, and AI-controlled defense turrets. To breach the flagship's defenses, the Spectre would need to employ every trick in the human arsenal. As Lang and her team approached the heart of the Vracs fleet, tension ran high. They had been shadowing the Vrakthar for hours, waiting for the right moment to strike. They couldn't afford to be detected. not even for a second. Every moment they spent in close proximity to the flagship increased the likelihood of being discovered. Lang's breath came in shallow, measured bursts as she stared at the blinking console in front of her. "All systems are green," the technician reported. "We're invisible to their sensors so far." But Lang knew better than to trust a report entirely. The Vraks had tricks up their sleeves. In the vast, empty cold of space, even a millisecond's delay could mean the difference between life and death. The crew of the Spectre was prepared for the worst, prepared for the moment when their invisibility would fail, when their carefully laid plans would crumble. It came just as they were about to enter the flagship's sensor blind spot. A sudden, horrifying realization flashed across Lang's mind. A Vrax fighter, one of the smaller reconnaissance ships, had veered too close to their path. In an instant, the Spectre's stealth tech failed. They had been detected. The alarms blared, red lights flashing on every console. The Vraks had already locked onto their location, and Lang had seconds to react. "Evasive maneuvers," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The ship jolted as it accelerated, but the Vraks ships were already closing in. The Spectre wasn't fast enough to outrun them. This wasn't just a stealth mission anymore. It was a fight for survival. The crew scrambled to their stations, fighting to hold the ship together as the Vraks fired on them. The Spectre's shields flared, absorbing the first few hits, but the ship was only designed to take light damage. This was no longer about precision. It was about outlasting the Vraks long enough to reach the heart of their war machine. The battle had shifted once more, this time from stealth to full-scale assault. "We need to disable their targeting systems," Lang shouted over the intercom, adrenaline flooding her system. "Prepare the EMP pulse." The EMP pulse was humanity's last-ditch weapon. It would disable all nearby Vrak ships for a crucial few minutes, giving the Spectre a fighting chance. But if they failed, it would be the end. Lang gripped the armrests of her seat as she activated the pulse. The ship rattled as the shockwaves spread out from the Spectre, sending out a powerful electromagnetic wave that disrupted the Vrax's targeting systems. For a moment, everything went still. Their enemies lost their lock on the Spectre. It was a brief window of opportunity, but it was enough. "Now, Captain," came the voice of her tactical officer. "We've got our opening. Let's finish this." The Spectre surged forward straight for the Vrakthar. The ship's engines screamed as it entered the heart of the Vrak's fleet, dodging enemy fire with the grace of a predator on the hunt. And as the human ship sped toward its target, Lang couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. This was it. The beginning of the end for the Vrak's dominion. But the battle was far from over. The tension in the command center of the Spectre was palpable. Every crew member was acutely aware of what was at stake. This was no longer just a mission. It was the final gambit, the last roll of the dice. Captain Lang's mind raced as she watched the looming silhouette of the Vrakthar grow larger on the view screen. The massive warship, a floating fortress in the dark of space, was nearly within their reach. The stakes couldn't have been higher. They had one shot to cripple the heart of the Vrak's dominion. If they failed, humanity's last hope would be gone. "Full speed ahead," Lang commanded, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. "Prepare the boarding teams. We hit them fast, hit them hard, and hit them where it hurts." Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Callis, a veteran of the Mars Defense Corps, was already issuing orders to the team. "Deploying boarding pods," he reported, his voice calm under pressure. The Spectre had been designed with an unconventional advantage, small agile boarding pods that could latch onto enemy ships without triggering alarms. These pods were armed with explosive charges, EMP disruptors, and close combat weapons, all designed to wreak havoc inside the Vraxian ship's command structure. "We'll have to fight our way to the heart of the Vrakthar," Lang muttered under her breath. "Every second counts." As the Spectre neared the flagship, a series of explosions lit up the dark expanse of space. The Vraks were firing relentlessly, launching swarms of smaller drones designed to pierce the hull of any ship foolish enough to get too close. But the Spectre was fast, too fast to be caught in their nets. With one final maneuver, Lang dove the ship into the shadow of the Vrakthar, and they drifted silently within the massive warship's docking bays, unseen by its sensors. The time had come. The boarding pods were deployed, and the Spectre's crew braced themselves. The pods, designed to withstand the harshest conditions, shot out in a blur of motion, each one locking onto the surface of the Vrakthar with magnetic precision. Inside the pods, teams of elite soldiers, heavily armored and armed with energy rifles and vibroblades, prepared for the brutal assault ahead. Their mission was simple: infiltrate, sabotage, and destroy the heart of the Vrak's command. Taking out Zirak, the warlord, would cripple the Dominion's strategic control. Inside the Vrakthar, the Vrak's warlord Zirak stood at the center of his command bridge, overseeing the fleet's progress with a cold, calculating gaze. His mind was already considering the next phase of the invasion, the final crushing blow that would break humanity's resistance. But as his officers scrambled to prepare for the next wave of attacks, something caught his attention. A strange ripple in the ship's sensors, a momentary glitch. He narrowed his eyes. "Status report," he growled, his voice filled with suspicion. The officer at the controls flinched. "Sir, we're detecting an anomaly in the lower docking bays," the officer replied, his voice wavering. "A malfunction?" Zirak demanded. "No, sir. Something is aboard the ship." Zirak's blood ran cold. He had anticipated a direct assault from humanity's fleet, but never something like this. A sneaky infiltration, a sabotage mission, was a tactic far too dangerous to underestimate. The Vraks had never encountered a species willing to fight on these terms. Could sense it now in the air. The humans weren't here to beg for mercy or to survive. They were here to destroy everything he had built, prepare the security forces, seal the docking bays and deploy the sentries, Zirak ordered, his mind whirling with calculations. He knew that taking out the Spectre wouldn't be enough. These humans were relentless, resourceful. They were more dangerous than he had ever imagined. They would not stop until they had claimed victory, no matter the cost. Outside the command bridge, human soldiers burst through the hatch, cutting down Vraxian guards with brutal efficiency. The Vraks, armed with plasma rifles and exoskeletons, fought back fiercely, but the humans were relentless, their combat training honed by years of resistance. Each soldier had been through hell and back, and the thought of dying for their planet fueled their fury. The boarding party was like a hammer smashing through the heart of the Vrakthar, relentless and unstoppable. "Keep pushing forward," shouted Sergeant Reyes, the leader of the assault team. He was a man whose face was carved from years of war, his eyes cold but determined. The Vrakthar's corridors were dark, twisting, and filled with the smell of burning metal. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the walls were streaked with the blood of fallen Vraxian soldiers. It was a war zone, chaotic, disorienting, but the humans moved with purpose, striking down any resistance in their path. With every floor they ascended, the enemy grew more desperate. Vraxian drones, programmed to defend key areas, flooded the eye. Corridors attacking from every angle. But the humans were prepared. Tactical grenades, each one packed with a high-voltage EMP charge, disabled the drones in an instant, rendering them useless before they could even get a shot off. The human soldiers were a storm, sweeping through the ship's inner sanctum with unmatched speed. In the heart of the Vrakthar, Zirak stood motionless, his mind calculating their next move. The ship's AI, a cold, unfeeling entity programmed to protect its master at all costs, had locked down the interior, sealing off all entrances to the core. Zirak had anticipated this. He had known that the humans would come, that they would strike at the heart of his empire. But the Vrakthar was fortified, its command core a labyrinth of reinforced steel, access points protected by layers of defense. Outside the command center, human soldiers breached the last line of defense. Sergeant Reyes, leading the charge, dropped to a crouch as he made his way through the narrow passage leading to Zirak's throne room. The countdown had begun. In less than 5 minutes, the boarding team would reach their target, the warlord himself. Zirak's last hope lay in his ability to outthink his enemies. He had always been one step ahead, commanding from the shadows, manipulating the strings of the war like a master puppet. But now, with the humans tearing their way through his flagship, with the knowledge that his defeat was imminent, a dark realization began to sink in. This wasn't just a tactical loss. This was the end of everything he had worked for. This was humanity's moment. Lang watched the final boarding, party's progress through her command screen, her heart pounding. The Vrakthar was in disarray. In a few short moments, the Vrak's warlord would be within her reach. Ready? Lang's voice was low, but every member of her crew knew the weight of the question. This would be the strike that determined the fate of the galaxy. A single push would end it all. The final moments aboard the Vrakthar were like a death rattle, a chorus of destruction echoing through the warship's corridors. Every step of Sergeant Reyes's team was met with fierce resistance. The Vraks were no longer thinking strategically. They were panicking, lashing out in every direction. As the human soldiers pressed forward, they encountered a last line of defense, a massive blast door, reinforced by layers of composite alloys, and armed with a deadly force field designed to vaporize anything that dared approach. This was it, the final obstacle between them and Zirak. Reyes crouched low behind a pillar, his eyes scanning the control panel at the far end of the corridor. He could hear the hum of the energy field, feel the oppressive weight of the Vraks, Warlord's defenses bearing down on him. "We need to disable this door now," he muttered under his breath. "On it, Sergeant," said Private Miller, a tech expert who had spent months perfecting the art of hacking into alien security systems. With a quick flick of his wrist, Miller deployed a compact device, a black cylinder no bigger than a soda can. The device sent out a pulse that immediately began overriding the Vraks' complex systems. The door's force field flickered, fluctuating with a menacing hum. It wasn't enough. They were running out of time. Reyes glanced at the timer ticking down in the corner of his HUD. 30 seconds until Lang's countdown reached 0. They needed this door open. Miller's fingers flew over the device as sweat poured down his brow. Come on," he muttered. Just as he was about to give up hope, the device emitted a low beep. The force field died. The door began to grind open, revealing the heart of the Vrakthar. "Move out!" Reyes shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. With a roar, the human soldiers surged forward, weapons raised. The doors parted with an agonizing screech, revealing the vast, cold chamber beyond. It was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just left behind. Inside, at the center of the room, stood the Vrak's warlord, Zirak. His towering form was cloaked in shadow, his red, multifaceted eyes gleaming with a cold fury. His exoskeletal armor reflected the dim light of the command room, its razor-sharp edges glinting like the edge of a knife. At his side, a weapon unlike any the humans had ever seen, a sleek black staff with a pulsating energy core, reminded them of the power he wielded. But despite his intimidating presence, Zirak's posture betrayed something more unsettling: fear. Zirak had anticipated an assault like this. He had known that the humans would come for him, but his arrogance had led him to believe that he could outmaneuver them. He had underestimated the human spirit, their resilience, their willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. The tables had turned, and now his fate hung by a thread. "You dare to breach my ship, human?" Zirak's voice was low, a growl, that reverberated in the room. He stood at the center, his alien soldiers arrayed around him in a defensive formation. But his eyes flicked toward the humans, knowing that this was the end. Reyes didn't flinch. "It's over, Zirak," he said. His voice was as steady as the ground beneath him, as unwavering as his resolve. "You're not getting out of this." The Vrak's warlord's eyes narrowed. "Foolish creatures, you cannot comprehend the consequences of this war. We will—" A deafening explosion interrupted him. The Vrakthar shook violently as a massive tremor rattled the ship. Reyes's helmet visor flickered as sparks flew from the walls. The blast wasn't from a missile or artillery, it was internal, an EMP charge detonated within the ship's core. Lang had launched the Spectre's final strike, initiating the countdown that would tear the flagship apart from within. "We don't have much time," Reyes growled, eyes locked on Zirak as the room descended into chaos. The warlord's soldiers were retreating, attempting to regroup around their leader, but Reyes and his team weren't giving them the chance. They moved fast, too fast for the Vraks to adapt. Reyes raised his weapon, a high-powered laser rifle that hummed with lethal intent. "Get down!" he shouted to his team, and in a single fluid motion, the human soldiers dropped to the ground, opening fire. The sharp, crackling sound of lasers filled the chamber as the Vrax guards collapsed one by one, their shields unable to withstand the human firepower. Zirak, realizing the futility of his position, turned to flee. His massive form shot toward a hidden exit, but before he could reach it, Reyes was on him. In one swift motion, the sergeant tossed a grenade at the warlord's feet, its timer counting down with deadly precision. The explosion shattered the floor beneath them, sending Zirak crashing into the reinforced walls. He struggled to rise, but the Vrax warlord was no longer the untouchable figure he once was. Reyes approached slowly, his eyes locked on Zirak's, his expression one of grim determination. "You lost the moment you underestimated us," he said, his voice low but clear. Zirak's red eyes flared with rage, but there was something else, a flicker of realization. It was the same realization every invading species came to understand too late. The human spirit was indomitable. Even against impossible odds, against a far superior enemy, humanity had managed to not just survive, but to fight back and win. Zirak's weapon. The energy staff hummed to life again, but before he could raise it, Reyes's rifle discharged. The shot was precise, cutting through the alien's armor with ruthless efficiency. Zirak fell to the floor, the life draining from his body. Reyes stood over him, chest heaving from exertion. His team moved quickly, planting explosive charges around the warlord's remains. The Vrakthar's core was beginning to destabilize, the countdown nearing its end. They had done it. The warlord was dead. The heart of the Vrax dominion was torn apart and humanity had won. But there was no time to savor the victory. The Vrakthar was already crumbling. "Move! Now!" Reyes barked, and the team scrambled to regroup. As they raced back toward the boarding pods, the ship's destruction was imminent. The walls groaned and cracked as explosions ripped through the Vrakthar, tearing it apart from within. As the last of the team climbed aboard the escape pods, the Vrakthar detonated in a brilliant flash of light, sending shockwaves through space. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The shockwave from the Vrakthar's destruction rippled through the darkness of space, its brilliance momentarily blinding. Captain Lang stood on the bridge of the Spectre, her hands gripping the rail, her face hard with the cold realization that victory came at a steep price. The Vrakthar had been a symbol of the Vrax Dominion's might, their flagship, the pride of an empire that had crushed every world in its path. Now it was nothing but debris, scattered across the void, the remnants of a civilization that thought itself invincible. Yet the battle wasn't over. The war still raged, and the galaxy was far from secure. Lang took a deep breath. "Report," she said, her voice steady, but the weight of what they had just accomplished still pressed down on her shoulders. "Warlord Zirak is dead," Lieutenant Kellis reported, his voice filled with a grim satisfaction. "The Vrakthar's central core is annihilated, and the fleet is in disarray. We've struck a crippling blow to their command structure." "Casualties?" Lang asked, though she knew the answer. "Severe. We've lost good men today, Captain," Kelly said quietly. "But we're alive and we've delivered a message." Lang nodded, her gaze flicking to the starry expanse outside the bridge's viewports. "That message is clear. Humanity is not to be underestimated. We will fight, we will survive, and we will win." The destruction of the Vrakthar was only the beginning. As the Spectre drifted through the stars, its crew, battered but resolute, knew that this victory, though monumental, was only the first chapter in a larger, much more dangerous story. The Vrax Dominion was powerful, yes, but it was not invincible. Humanity had shown its strength, its unyielding will to survive, and now the galaxy would have to reckon with that truth. But even as Lang allowed herself a brief moment of reflection, a communication pinged on the bridge, drawing her attention back to the present. A voice crackled through the intercom, distant but unmistakable. "Captain Lang, this is Admiral Vega of the Earth Defense Fleet. We've received your transmission. The Vrax fleet is in disarray, but we're detecting multiple warships moving toward your position." "It's a trap." Lang's pulse quickened. "How many?" "Over 30 Vrax warships fully armed. They've consolidated their remaining forces. This is their counterstrike." "Understood," Lang replied, her voice resolute. "All crew, members to battle stations. We won't give them the chance to regroup. It's time to finish this." She turned to her tactical officer. "Kellis, prepare the Spectre for a full engagement, all weapons online." "Aye, Captain," Kellis replied, already moving to execute her orders. The Spectre was a nimble ship, designed for fast strikes and quick escapes, but it was no match for a full fleet. However, it wasn't just about firepower, it was about strategy, and Lang had always believed in using the enemy's hubris against them. The Vrax had underestimated humanity. Now they would pay for it. "We'll fight with everything we have," Lang said, her voice calm, but her eyes alight with purpose. "But we can't win this fight alone." As the crew scrambled to prepare, Lang opened a secure channel to Earth's fleet. She needed reinforcements, but more than that, she needed unity. "Admiral Vega, I'm sending coordinates for a coordinated strike. We'll take out their flagship and cripple their command structure, but we need your ships on the front lines. Now." There was a brief silence on the other end of the comms, then Vega's voice came through, filled with grim determination. "Understood, Captain. We're with you. The fleet will move into position." Lang closed the channel and looked to her crew. The tension on the bridge was almost tangible. The final battle for the fate of humanity was about to begin. The Vrax Dominion had thought they could crush humanity under their heel, but they had underestimated one thing: the resilience of a species backed into a corner. They had underestimated the fire that burned in every human heart. As the Spectre tore through space, charging toward the heart of the Vrax fleet, Lang's thoughts drifted to Earth. The home they had fought to protect, the family and friends, who had given everything for this moment. "This is for them," she whispered to herself. The first strike came without warning. The Spectre engaged the nearest Vrax warship, its energy cannons opening up with a blinding flash. The Vrax ship, though larger and more heavily armored, had underestimated the Spectre's agility. In a matter of moments, the enemy ship was crippled, its weapons and engines disabled by a well-placed EMP blast. The battle had begun in earnest, but as Lang's crew fought valiantly, the odds grew steeper. The Vrax fleet was vast, and they had regrouped under a new commander, one even more ruthless than Zirak. But Lang had something the Vrax didn't: the element of surprise. "Prepare the final strike," Lang commanded, her voice low but filled with an intensity that sent a ripple of excitement through her crew. The Spectre's systems powered up, the final weapon primed for its first and last deployment. In a flash of brilliance, Lang's ship rocketed toward the Vrax flagship, her heart pounding as the countdown ticked away. This was the moment of truth. The final shot was fired, and the flagship, the last bastion of the Vrax Dominion, exploded in a shower of flames and debris. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated victory, but Lang knew better than to celebrate just yet. The Vrax would come back stronger, fiercer, and more determined. This battle had been won, but the war was far from over. As the Spectre drifted through the debris field, Lang and her crew stood victorious, but all too aware that the true test of humanity's strength was still to come. "The galaxy will remember this day," Lang said, turning away from the view screen. "But it's up to us to write the next chapter." And with that, humanity's fight for survival continued, the stars above now filled with both uncertainty and hope. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and leave a comment below. What do you think is next for humanity? How will the Vrax respond? We'd love to hear your thoughts and theories. Stay tuned for more epic space battles and thrilling adventures. Your support means everything to us.